Going. And we're going to do a screen share. If it will let me screen share. And let me do this earlier. It's going to make a monkey out of me. There it is. Share screen. Can everyone see the screen that I'm looking at, which is my homepage? Come on, computer, don't do this to me. Oh, it hates me. I apologize. I'm so sorry. Spent 3 hours this morning trying to make sure that this would work. I need that screen share. My apologies. Best laid plans of mice and men. Or at least mice. Okay. Yeah, that's very true, Mindy. We've had several people that have said that they've had some electronics issues this weekend. Oh. All right. Let's see if this will do it. Does everyone see a very nasty looking raccoon?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. We got screen share. Sorry, friend of mine in Australia gets a bit of a giggle out of trash pandas. They don't have them there. Okay, there we are. Yay. Woo, success. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being patient with the technical issues. Let's jump right into it. Life masks and death masks. The difference between the two is a life mask is an imprint, a part of a human body that is molded for replication while a person is still alive. And this is a very important thing because it restricts some of the things that you can do in a casting. It also restricts the limitations of what features are shared during a life casting. It's a little difficult to have someone with their eyes open, especially in a death cast. You can't do that. But while you're doing a life casting, you need to put something for the person to breathe because you will cover their whole face. Now, we have seen castings of the hand, of torso, and other body parts. What you're looking at right now is a life casting of Abraham Lincoln. He actually had 2 of them made. This one's from 1860, and Leonard Volk of Chicago, Illinois made this. It was just about the time he was receiving the Republican nomination for president. Now, the second one is this. As you can see, it has his beard. The first one did not. This has been referred to as a death mask, but it was actually taken 2 months before he was assassinated. It is a life mask. And this was done by Clark Mills in February of 1865. Now, a life mask is normally made to remember somebody. It's a fondness, it's a special person. We see a lot of actors and actresses that are getting life masks and life castings made. This is often done for special effects. It's done, stunt doubles will wear them. In fact, talk about stunt double. This is the late Sean Connery. He had played James Bond, and the casting you see on the right side was a life casting taken by a stunt driver who was driving a car at a very dangerous position in one of the Bond movies, but had to look like James Bond. So we've seen life castings in other places. Now we know who this is. This is Mr. Harrison Ford. He did Han Solo in the Star Wars movie. He had a life casting made for special effects when he was encased in carbonite. A life casting needs to be done in everyday situations for people who are having prosthetics, whether it's a medical or an accident, military service. Oftentimes arms, legs, hands, even facial reconstructions of the cheek or the nose or the ear are made. And one of the ways is to make a casting of the missing limb where it connects. Then an exact casting will be made of an item that will sleeve over and fit onto the bare end of the limb. Normally it is wrapped with a sock to prevent blistering. What you see here in the middle, this metal piece is actually the knee, the metal knee for the piece. It comes apart, and the plastic piece on the right is an insert that binds the top plastic sleeve that's molded to fit with the metal knee so that there's less pressure and less abrasion. So when a life casting can work, it helps in an everyday process. So we see something that has been around since the Middle Ages and examples of castings in the 16th century. We see it every day and most people don't even realize it, but these are life castings. Now, a life mask in the 16th century Europe was used to create statues and monuments, even reliefs on tombs. You take a casting so the artist doesn't need the person there for an extended period of time. This is actually a life casting that was made in 1785 by our first US President, George Washington. He had a life mask made by a French sculptor named Jean-Antoine Houdin. And this was done at Mount Vernon. In order to get the 6'1", very tall General Washington to have the casting done, Houdin made him lay down. When he laid down, he covered his face with a grease, which was a release agent. Then he added wet plaster all over his eyes, put straws in his nose, and once that cured, added the rest of the plaster. When the entire plaster piece was finished, he removed it. He then did a casting so that he could make a statue being as authentic to the original face as possible without having George Washington there. As you can see, this piece has the eyes open. That was the artist adding his own creative licensing to be able to modify the mask to get the sculpture to look like it had open eyes. So you can see a little bit on the right side of the screen is the one eye. You see what looks like a bit of a C around it. That was the artist adding more plaster and carving into it to make the eyes for Washington. What he actually did is made a replica. That is the statue that he carved. It's made of marble and it sits in the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City, New York. Now in the 17th century, death masks were made by covering the face with wax or clay, then using that impression to make either plaster or wax or bronze. Today, we have several new materials that are a lot easier, environmentally friendly, nicer and safer to use, and very durable. You can have these castings made of yourself and of your family. More recent ones, the imprint and life casting of a baby's feet. This one is a casting of a person holding the paws of their pet. And this is one that was very interesting. It's a painting of Black Hawk. He was a Native American Sioux warrior. Born in 1768 in Illinois of the US, he fought with the British to push the American settlers out of his land. He was captured in 1832, but when he relayed his life story to a translator, they created a book and he was a national sensation. There's actually a historical site named after him in Illinois. And this is the first and oldest life casting of a Native American we could find record of. This was presumed to have been done in 1830. It is sitting at the Black Hawk State Historical Society in Illinois, USA. That's quite an astonishing thing that there would actually be a life casting made of him. Now, this is another person. This is the Marquis de Lafayette. He was a French aristocrat, and at the age of 28 in 1785, he was a general of the U.S. troops during the American Revolutionary War. He wasn't just the general in that war, he was also the general in the French Revolution and in the July Revolution. His life casting, which is this, what we see, front, back, ears, even part of the neck stock and the collar of his outfit was cast. That had to be a mess. But it was made in 1785. It's currently in the Cornell University Johnson Museum of Art. And most of these, if they are on display, they're on display at all times. If they are put aside, it is either for restoration and maintenance, or because they're cycling out other displays, and it will take 6 months to a year before they cycle it back. Now, some of you may have seen this. Death masks were not, and life masks were not just memorial pieces. With a death mask, one of the things that was strongly used, which is why there are so many, was an art called phrenology. It was believed to be the way of examining a person's face, their skull, to determine their intellect, and if, in all honesty, they were a psychopath. So many criminals that were executed had casts, like a death cast made of their face. And scientists would try to study this, and doctors tried to study this, to see if they could determine who would have psychological tendencies and a danger to society, to kind of find ways of training them not to be violent. The phrenology study of Edinburgh in Scotland had over 2,000 death masks specifically for the study of phrenology. And this chart you see up on the screen was one of the charts. There's several different manuscripts running around from the 1870s and 1890s on eBay and Etsy and various other places. Very interesting read if you can get a hold of one. The study fell out of favor by about the early 20th century, and they were instead used for historical or medical research use for building prosthetics. But unfortunately, the 2,000-piece collection in the phrenology study of Edinburgh, Scotland, is now down to less than 1,000, and it's stored at a different location. Once they kind of debunked phrenology, it went by the way of the dinosaur. Now, this was a small model, and I've seen them in different sizes, that also showed identification if certain parts of the body were bigger, smaller, if you had a wart or a birthmark, that also would change the perspective of everything. So they really did fully divulge what they felt was an identification for the person. You were branded basically by the way you look. Now, the next few photos we're going to show are of photos or paintings of people along with their death mask. And the difference between a life and death mask, the life mask is made when the person was alive. The death mask is made after you've passed away. Now, the first one that we have here is Ned Kelly. He was an Australian thief and a gang leader. He also was a police murderer. He was hanged to death for his crimes in 1880. And we see in the picture, he has a beard. In the casting, he does not. So they took that casting for study, and the casting is still in existence. I cannot find its current owner, but I did find it was not destroyed. It was moved to a new location. This one, many Americans may know, is John Dillinger, and he was an American gangster and a thief. He robbed 24 banks and 4 police stations at the time of the Great Depression. Now, he was killed by the police in a massive shootout and an ambush in 1935. Supposedly, the death mask you see on the left, and sadly, yes, the picture above in small portion, is a picture of him in the morgue after he was deceased. Apparently, that death mask was not made with permission of the FBI. Someone came in, took the picture, made the casting, and left, and the FBI didn't know about it, they said, until after the death mask showed up. And a lot of people were very unhappy about that. The practice for studying these death masks of criminals were quite extensive in the 19th and 20th century. However, Queen Victoria, in the latter end of the 19th century, expressed how tasteless she thought death masks were. And when she died, her grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II, Emperor of Germany, tried to have a death mask made of her, but the family stopped him because they knew how much she absolutely hated it. So we're going to go through a couple different death masks, and the oldest one I could find record of is this next one. Born in 1483, died in 1546 from an apoplectic stroke, the religious leader Martin Luther. So 1456 is the oldest plaster death cast that I can get confirmed. This one is from Mary, Queen of Scots, born 1542 to 1587. Now we have two different castings. This one is a painted plaster piece with hair and cloth to make it look realistic. She was also called Mary I, Stewart of Scotland. She was James V's daughter. She was killed, sadly, by beheading. And this piece is in the Mary Stuart Museum in Jedburgh, UK. Now, this one is a death mask as well, but it's cast in wax. One of the things that's interesting about this is someone added eyelashes and eyebrows. We will see from time to time that they're painted or they're carved in plaster, but this appears to be horsehair. I can't get any information on it, but if you see the side view over to your right, you can see that it's dimensional and it wasn't cast in wax. So it's quite possible that hair was added after the fact, but that's a lot of detail to put on a death mask. Wax ones are harder to find because they tend to melt and they're not always well taken care of. They damage quickly. This one is from Oliver Cromwell, born 1599, died in 1658. He was an English general and a statesman. He died of septicemia from a urinary tract infection. This next one is Dr. Samuel Johnson. He was a writer, born in 1709. Sorry, I skipped myself. This one's Isaac Newton. Looked at the wrong spot. Looking at that going, that's not Mr. Johnson. Isaac Newton, born 1642, died 1727. Mathematician, astronomer, author. He actually died from a kidney stone problem. They're painful, but he actually died from it. This one is Dr. Samuel Johnson. He's an English writer, and he died from heart failure. Now, this one's interesting. The casting is bronze, but because of the rank of the person, this was the last king of Prussia, or the last one to hold that title. It's Frederick the Great. Born in 1712, he died in 1786 of natural causes. He was found sitting in his armchair in his library and requested to be buried outside under the patio next to his dogs. The other thing about this was when this death mask was made, he was not laying down. They sat him up, put a collar around the neck, and put the plaster on him while he was sitting upright. That takes a lot more effort to do so, and you don't see a whole lot of them being done that way. Normally, death masks are made as the person is laying down. We also see the unique texture of the hair that comes along with that. And very, very short. But also, just like Maximilian Lafayette, we have the back of the head, the ears, the neck, the full thing. This one, Mr. Benjamin Franklin, born 1706 to 1790. He was an inventor, an author, and died from complications of pleurisy, that is inflammation around the lungs. Makes it complicated and difficult to breathe. This one, Maximilien Robespierre, born 1758 to 1794, lawyer and statesman in France. He was beheaded in the French Revolution. And when I talked to someone about this specifically, they informed me to take a look at the very bottom of the piece when the mask was cast for this, the death mask. you see a very definitive line on the bottom. They did that because they wanted to get as much of the head as possible. And since he had been beheaded, there was not much of the neck for reinforcement of the mold. But that is where he was decapitated. I apologize for any gory details, but some of it is actually shocking to think that that was a detail they specifically wanted. This next picture is the first Viscount Nelson, first Duke of Bront, Admiral Horatio Nelson, born 1758, died in 1805 from a gunshot wound in battle. This one is a casting of Napoleon Bonaparte. We know who he was, a French military strategist and politician. He was born in 1769 and died in 1821. They believe it was stomach cancer. And whereas we saw the picture that had the King of Prussia, King Frederick, we see that for some reason, Napoleon's ear is missing in part. Not sure why that is. I could not find an answer for why. This one, Ludwig van Beethoven, born 1770, died in 1827, composer and pianist. He died from a bedridden illness that was never specified, as we see a very high mark on the forehead and no roundness to the back, no ear. This was a very flat casting. They did not make a very large mask on this one. From what I understand, it was the preference of the person doing the casting. Now, this is someone we may not see very much of, but he was very important in history. His name was William Burke, and the drawing was of 1829. He was responsible, along with William Hare, to unfortunately murder people and then sell the bodies to medical schools for examinations and autopsy. And they were caught. William Hare was believed to not be intelligent enough to have committed the crime, so he became state's evidence because they had no evidence at all and said William Burke did it. He was hanged to death, and this may be a little disturbing, I apologize. That is a death mask of him, and the wallet in front was made from his skin. Unfortunately, that was considered something that would be done from time to time, is to preserve a book or a wallet made from the skin of a human. Most places in the United States, that's illegal to do. You cannot have human flesh. There are certain allowances, but they're so technical. We're not going into that bunny trail today. When he was hanged to death, his body was sent to, of all places, Edinburgh, Scotland, where he was then, the face was, a death mask was made of his face, and then he was dissected himself. It's still in the Surgeons Hall Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland. You can see both the mask and the the wallet on display. Come on. There we go. This one is Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, died of an epileptic seizure after a stroke in 1852, born in 1769. Something you'll see here, which you'll see very often after people have passed away, the skin will recess. Also, muscles relax so you don't have your full structure. With the way that his lips are indented and the cheeks have this crease, it's quite possible he either lost all of his teeth or most of them. And you see a very distinct chin, which if he were sitting upright, it would probably have been, that dimple would not be there. This one was Robert E. Lee. He died of pneumonia in 1870, born in 1807. This is his death mask. This one is the first Earl of Beaconsfield. It's Benjamin Disraeli. He was the Prime Minister of the UK. He was born in 1804, died in 1881. He died of bronchitis. And this was also taken while he was sitting upright. This was not a death mask that was taken while he was laying down. This one is composer Richard Wagner, born 1813, died in 1883. He died of heart failure. This is the death mask, and pictured to the left is Ulysses S. Grant, born 1822, died in 1885. He was the 18th US president, and he had died of throat cancer. A quick story on how he had died of throat cancer. At one point, he was sent cigars because of all of his successes in military. And it was recorded that at one point he was smoking 20 cigars a day, full cigars, not little ones, 20 cigars a day, because he had been given so many of them, he was afraid they would go bad. So sadly, it's not much of a wonder that sadly he passed of throat cancer. 20 cigars a day is excessive. This one is Theodore Roosevelt, born in 1858 and died in 1919. He was the 26th president of the United States. He died of a blood clot in the lung, and his mask was taken while he was laying down. This is a death mask of 28th president of the US, Mr. Woodrow Wilson, born in 1856, died in 1924, heart failure after a stroke. His was also taken laying down. We can see that there's an excessive amount of plaster around where the eyelashes are, which is rather interesting because I've not seen that in too many other death masks. So it makes me wonder, what did they put too much release agent on the eyelashes and it held the release agent, which caused it to gum up and have those distinct eyelashes. This one is Mr. Vladimir, I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Ilyich Ulyanov, we know as Vladimir Lenin. 1870 to 1924, he died of a brain hemorrhage. That was his death mask. This is Mr. James Joyce, an Irish novelist, born in 1882, died in 1941. And that is his death mask, which is currently on location at the James Joyce Tower and Museum in Dublin, Ireland. You can go and view it. Now, the following is also maybe a little disturbing. I would like to apologize in advance, but we did give a little bit of a warning that there may be some pictures that might upset people. This is for information and share with respect. This is a picture dated 1890 of two men in the process of doing a death mask. The departed person is sitting upright in the chair. We do not have a name of who is making the mask, nor do we have a name of the person who the mask is being made of, but the person is deceased. And you see the wooden board, it is a collar put around at about the neck level, and the plaster is put over until it hardens. Now they do put a release agent on there, and that makes it easier to remove the mold without causing any injury or damage to the remains. After it's cured, it leaves an imprint, and that is where you pour your replications of a variety of materials. Now, if you choose to have a death mask made, there are some details you definitely want to address. You want to make arrangements with the executor of your estate, and you also want to contact a funeral director for details. I talked to someone who used to make death masks, and he ended up retiring from it for health reasons. He did mention that when he went about doing it, he was shocked at the amount of people that never told their next of kin, never put it in a will, didn't talk to a funeral director, but paid them to make a death mask. And he would show up going, I'm here to do the death mask I was contracted to. And he said, so many people had the deer in the headlight look. They never realized it. They were never told. It was not passed on. He said the worst situation had occurred when he had shown up to make a death mask, and the person who contracted him is expected to die of a very old age. Sadly, she passed away in a car accident, was badly injured. The funeral director who had embalmed the body used a great deal of makeup and body putty to make her look structural reinforcement and as she was before the accident. He made the casting, but unfortunately, when he removed it, he also removed the body putty and paint that the funeral director had put a great deal of work into. The funeral director was not happy. So there are many things. If you're going to consider to do this, please make sure that you go ahead and get that addressed. Let somebody know that it's going to be done. Now this one, I apologize, should be a little bigger. This is a death mask of Napoleon Bonaparte, and this one was sold in 2013 at Bonhams of London for an astounding £169,250. That comes out to US dollars of $209,329.25. The original copy of Napoleon's death masks were made in plaster, but this one has the best record and best provenance of any mask out there, and it is believed to be the very first casting made from the original cast off of Napoleon. The mask was cast in London for Countess Bertrand. The inscription on the back is in Italian, and even though I'm half Italian, I'm not going to butcher it. My grandmother would kill me. So allow me to give you the translation of what is on the back of the mask you're looking at. It reads, "A homage to Madame Bertrand's peerless merit, 27th August, 1821. On September 1st of 1821, a note from Countess Bertrand confirms the existence of a mask made from a casting fabricated on St. Helena, where Napoleon had died. Madame Hortense Breyer, the daughter of the Countess, inherited the mask and then gifted it to Prince Napoleon Victor. He and his sister, the Countess de Witt, gave it to the Musée National des Châteaux de Maison in 1979. By 2013, it was deacquisitioned and put to auction, where it made that massive amount of money. So very well documented, possibly the very first casting from it. Death masks don't normally go for that price, but they are very pricey and hard to come by. Now, while we're discussing death masks, let's poke into something rather quickly that was frustrating when I did a lot of the research and talked to several people who specialized in this. And they said a lot of things are being called death masks. They're not a death mask. A life casting is made, or a life mask is when you're alive. A death casting or death mask is made when you are deceased. A mask that is made from a sculpture by an artist is called a funeral mask. It is not a death mask. And yet, many pieces are referenced as death masks. With that, we're looking at the Mask of Tutankhamun. It's Egyptian, estimated to be 1325 BCE. It's in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo in Egypt. It's gold, lapis lazuli, quartz obsidian in the eyes, carnelian, feldspar, turquoise, amazonite, and faience, which is a thin glazed tin pottery. This was over top of the body, and this was made to identify him not only for ceremonial use, but also to identify him so that his Ka, which is the spirit, would see him in the afterlife and recognize and know to come back. This one is actually Egyptian. It's wood overlaid with gold, and it's cartonnage, which is linen and papyrus covered with plaster. This was also registered as a death mask, but it is actually a funeral mask. It was not molded to anyone's face. He was a nobleman by the name of Wah, which is W-A-H. This is sitting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, New York, and is believed to be 1000 BC. This one is a carved jade funeral mask. It was also listed as a death mask, but it was not made from a molding of a person. It was carved from the Mayan king Pakal, believed to be 500 BC to 250 AD. They're not entirely sure the date of when he ruled. The museum has made a replication of his tomb and has this in presentation, the actual death mask that was over his remains. This one, not a casting, but a death mask made of solid gold, 400 BCE from Spetsia, which is now part of Russia. It's Thracian in manufacture and sits in the National Archaeological Museum in Sofia, Belgium. This one I actually thought was a life casting, but was confirmed, no, it isn't. It's Egyptian, which is got some of the Roman influence. We can see the snake bracelets on her arms. We see the veil and of course the accents in the hair, but this also came with a casting of the lady's feet. This is not proportionate, so it is not presumed to be a life or a death casting. Therefore, it is a funeral piece. This is in the Egyptian Museum of Torino, Italy, and it is not listed with an estimated date. This one is plaster, but it is not molded. It is a painted funeral mask of a young man, age unknown, circa 30 BC, and it was sold at auction in 2017. The person paid over $2,000 for it, US dollars, and have no idea who is the new owner and caretaker of it. This one is Peruvian in manufacture, and it was laying on top of the remains as an identifier for ritual and for ceremony. This one is gold with copper overlay and painted with cinnabar. It was estimated to be 8th to 14th century. That's a very wide range, but they really don't have an exact date on this. It's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This was also labeled as a death mask, but it is not a death mask. It's funeral and for ceremony or ritual purposes. This one is copper overlaid with gold. Sorry, this is a copper. This one's not overlaid with gold. That one is. This one is copper, and it's a Chinese 10th to 11th century Lao dynasty mask. As you see, there are some holes at the top, holes at the ears, and holes at the bottom of the chin. That was so this could be tied over the face of the departed. It was an identifier, it was ritualistic, but it was not an impression of the actual person. This one impressed me greatly. When I first saw it, I thought it was metal. It's gilt leather. Molded leather of a lady and gilt in gold. This is European in manufacture, 13th century Europe. It's in the Louvre, France Museum. A very interesting piece. It was listed as a death mask, but it is not molded from a person. Sometimes the features give it away. The proportions are not always spot on. This one is a wood funeral mask with paint. It's African in manufacture from Gabon, Africa, from the Punu tribe, circa 1850. It was sold at auction. We don't know who the buyer is. It would be worn during the funeral, but afterwards it would not be kept, which is very interesting to go through so much effort to carve something to represent a person you were laying to rest, and then you would not keep it. It was not burned. It was not destroyed. It was not buried with the deceased. They just would not keep it. And I can't seem to find anyone to specially tell me why it was not kept and what they did with all of the masks that they made, especially if it was made for everyone that passed away, especially in that tribe. Now we come to a very interesting one, and some of you may know this and have seen some of the pictures for this event. This is a picture of a young lady found floating in the Seine River in France. She was referred to as Inconnue de la Seine, the unknown woman of the Seine, sometimes called La Belle Italienne. Her story captivated the attention of many, but it started with her face and her death mask. According to French law, any body that was found without identification would be sent to the morgue. It had to be viewed by family, friends, and anyone to come and see a public viewing. That way they could identify the missing person. The body was placed in the morgue and to be viewed for 30 days. But after 30 days, nobody identified the young lady. No names, no one came forward, no one claimed her, estimated to be 19 years of age, no physical trauma or damage to the body. She was fully clothed when they found her, no marks of violence. And normally, apparently, the mortician specified when someone died of drowning, they become waterlogged and swollen. The body degrades faster. That didn't happen to this young lady. So she obviously did not die of drowning. Nobody knew who she was, but the pathologist in the mortuary was so taken by her beauty, he had a death mask made of her. He displayed this in his shop, and reproductions became very popular. You may think having the imprint of a deceased young lady may be a bit morbid, but it was a mystery. It was a very sad story. And it was a way that many people remembered someone who was lost. And her face and her death mask became exceedingly popular to have. In 1958, a man by the name of Peter Safar, an Australian physician, visited the home of an Asmund Laudales. He was a Norwegian toy maker. Peter Safar was so taken by the beauty of the mask on the wall of the unknown woman of sign that he asked to make a mold of it, and it was added to the first medical device of its kind. Now referred to as the most kissed face in the world. She's the medical device we know. This is her mask, the full death mask, if you can find it. It's hard to find, with the neck. The mask was cast and has saved the lives of millions from an unknown woman found floating in a river. She was the face put on Resusci Annie, the doll that taught people how to do CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. It saved the lives of millions. Now, with that, we look at why did people have death masks? Life masks for remembrance, death masks sometimes, yes. At one point, it was for study. It was for research. It was for medical identification. Other times to remember a person of great note. Other times, you never know what your death mask will be used for. In this case, the unknown woman of sign became a lifesaver. And they still use that face today. They change the hairstyle, the clothing, and a variety of other materials. Now, one thing we did want to point out, the body changes in death. And if you have a life mask taken now, and you were to have a mask taken after you pass away, it's very different. The body changes. And we wanted to try and tell you some of that. So these are gory details, and we left them towards the end because we didn't want to upset anybody. So we're going to describe some of the details of what happens to your earthly remains after you pass away. So if you want to duck out, no harm, no foul. I completely get it. It's all good. But when you die, the brain stops sending signals to various parts of the body, and your muscles will relax. This will cause the bowels and the bladder to release and empty. Your face muscles will relax. This can cause your mouth and eyes to open. The face will sag, and the eyes look like they recess into the sockets. Your nose, eyes, and chin will look extremely pronounced, and it will almost look like your skin is falling off. Now, the next thing that occurs is skin will dry out. And when it does, it starts to shrink or recess. If you've ever heard, and I just watched with my 12-year-old nephew, the Resident Evil series, yay for horror movies. Wow, my nephew and I have a lot to talk about. So one of the things they said is hair and fingernails continue to grow after you pass away. It's not the fact. It doesn't happen. After you die, they do not grow. It is the skin that dries out and shrinks that then pulls past the normal position of your nails, which make them look like they've grown, which makes your hair look like it has grown. But it does not continue to grow after you pass away. Now, unfortunately, before people were confirmed deceased, many people were interred alive, and sadly would be alive several days, clawing at their coffin. And in that case, yes, you may see very little growth after the fact. And so glad that we have advanced in medical technologies that we don't do that anymore. Within 2 to 6 hours after you die, calcium will build up in your muscles. This causes them to stiffen. When the strongest muscles contract, and your muscles always contract or they relax, muscles will contract and the strongest ones will take action first. So your mouth, because you use it very often, will open. Your eyelids will open. Your arms will cross. Your stomach muscles can contract, causing you to sit up. The stiffening is called rigor mortis, and it can last for up to 2 days. Now, by the end of 2 days, the calcium will break down. When it does, the muscles relax and the body becomes flexible again. If your body is moved, air can leave the lungs, passing through the vocal cords, making a sound of moaning. And this can affect your casting. If you pass away at home in your bed and are not recovered for, let's say, 12 to 18 hours, a rigor mortis would have set in. Your face and body will change. If the mouth opens, if the eyes open, this is not optimal for casting a death mask. You would want to wait till the rigor mortis is no longer there to have the casting. So you definitely want to work with someone if you wish to have a casting made. Oftentimes, lips can tighten and change facial features. The one thing the gentleman who made death masks said is very often many family members would say, that doesn't look like her. And he specified, when you pass away, your features do change. It can happen. There are varying different medical identifications that go along with this. So if you choose to have a life mask made, there are various different items you can find in the stores now. Baby's imprint, do hands. If you wish to have a larger part or face, you're going to want someone else's help. And there are kits designed specifically for that. So that is what we're looking at currently, is if you wish to have a mask done, realize a life mask or a death mask, it can vary. So thank you very much for asking a bunch of questions. I see a lot of comment. Sorry, skipping right through. Now, one of the things I wanted to do, and if I can get my computer to play nice, there we are. We talked about the Unknown Woman of Sign. This is a face mask of the Unknown Woman of Sign. Now, unfortunately, it's a smaller version. It's not the full version with the neck, but this was donated to our museum. And I apologize greatly to everyone. We wanted to have a replica of this so that we could sell these for charity at this event online. And every time we went to do the casting in solid resin, resin is heavy, the mold buckled on us. We've destroyed 3 molds trying to do a casting and it just didn't work. So we're hoping the next time there is an event, we can present this. But this was one of the smaller masks that was the precursor for, and I probably can't get it into the full measure. We actually have a Resusci Annie that's 1970. And this is a smaller version of it. And the nose part is here so that you could pinch it to learn how to do the mouth to mouth. There is a part on the neck where the air would allow to fill the chest cavity. So you could tell if you were giving enough to do full breaths to cause it to raise and lower. The plate set right here was supposed to be for your CPR, which is the palm that touches is flat. Your other hand, fingers go in between and you do full compressions. What was interesting with this piece we did not know they had was it can be modified for an adult or a child because it changes the amount of pressure you have to apply to the CPR device. And you'll see this flex plate is pushed against the compression plate to change the amount of pressure. So I don't think anyone would have guessed that this young lady's mask would have been used for a life-saving device. There is one other death mask our museum has in its collection. We do have a life mask, but I apologize. We did not get it out of the display case. And it's just, once it's in a display case, it's almost impossible to get a picture of it. And this one was a mask from a person who passed away in 1832. This is full size. And This is in plaster. Let me see if I can get this to sit upright. Okay. What information we have on this mask is this. This gentleman died in 1832. He was hanged to death, but we don't have a name and we don't have a crime. The body, we have no record of where it went. The only record we have are the remains were donated for phrenology and craniology study to Edinburgh, Scotland. That's all we have. We have no other information. We don't know if it was just the head that was sent for the craniology and the phrenology. We asked someone who is used to seeing records of donations, and they said if it had been the entire remains, they would have said the body. The fact that they said the remains were for this specific, we were informed that during the early 1800s, there were not a lot of remains to go around. You didn't have a lot of bodies to examine. So one medical school would dissect the remains and then pass it to another to dissect. With that being the case, it's quite possible that that's what happened to this gentleman, was that multiple parts were dissected and then the head was sent on. And that is why we have this death mask as it is. And it is in the museum's collection. We do not believe that it was cast in 1832. We believe it was cast from the mold thereof. Because if it's 1832, I have to say it's held up magnificently. But this was donated to the museum from someone who had passed away, and they were afraid their children would sell off all of their stuff or junk it. So we thank the gentleman very much for his very kind donation. So let's go ahead and open up. If anyone has any questions, now would be the time. I don't see any in the translation or in the message. I will say, if you would like, we're going to post some references. We put them in the beginning of the chat before we started that tells there are several museums, and thank you that the museums have done this technology to be able to share a lot of their information online. You can actually go through and see death masks in the private collection of many museums. They're putting them online now. So it is a hope that if you have any other questions on it, by all means, go ahead and ask. Now, there are two places that provide material. If you wish to have a life casting made, you can buy the materials yourself. The instructions can be found both online and if you purchase the material. Two different places currently. One is actually eco-friendly, biodegradable, and animal-friendly. It comes from Summit, New Jersey, from a company called Environ Molds. Environ Molds. And they sell you enough material that you can cast a hand, a foot, the face, but it will not be enough to cover the ears. You would have to buy a second kit or get a larger kit to be able to do that. The other company that sells specifically enough to be able to do a life casting is a company called Smooth On. It is in Macungie, Pennsylvania. And Smooth On has products that we have used with our museum, which we were very impressed with. They also have material that they sell for people who make replicas for medical suppliers. So if you wish to do a life casting and you want the face or the hand to look and feel like human flesh, Smooth On has not only the mold maker to accomplish that, but they have the flexible polymers that feel like real human skin that you can cast into that mold. We will share those links with people. And I want to thank everybody very much for their patience with the electronic issues that we had. And if anyone has any other questions, by all means, go ahead and drop a line. There are still some more lectures going on today. Please go ahead and check those out. And don't forget the bidding for charity online. Very many things. Thank you so much. It's definitely something intimate. Thank you, Mindy. Many people will have one made just to remember a family member. I've seen very few recently because there are some people that they feel it's just too morbid, and life and death are two sides of the same coin and should be appreciated equally. So thank you very much, everyone. Do have a wonderful day. And thank you very much for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time for the rest of the day. Thank you. Okay. My boss is going to kick me for that one. Use the gloves on the plaster. If you don't, it absorbs the oils and yellows. Okay.